Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Pursuit Live. I'm your producer, Chris. Joining me, as always, your creator and co-host, Mr. Dave Hawkins.
What's up, killers? What's going on?
And tonight we have a guest we've been waiting to talk to for quite some time now. And I'm sure everybody has been looking forward to this. We're ready for this. Please, everybody, welcome Mr. Bill Vanderhayden, the founder of IronWill Outfitters. Bill, thank you for joining us.
Hey guys, how's it going? Happy to be on.
So tonight we're gonna dig into a litany of topics, and anybody who knows this show, anybody who knows myself, knows our program manager Rob. We use your products. Can't say enough about them. Broadheads, knives, it doesn't matter. We use them. So this is something we've kind of been looking forward to, and you know, we're just excited to have you here. So again, I just want to take a moment and say thank you for taking the time out to chat with us tonight.
Yeah, you bet.
So Dave, you want to lead into this, and we'll get started here.
Let's do it. All right, Bill. So me and you, we're gonna get started here at the beginning of the show. You know, we like to introduce the guest, but a little bit more of like the personal background. You know, how long have you been in the outdoor industry? What got you going even in the beginning? You know, what got you outside hunting and ultimately on this journey you're on right now?
Yeah, well, what got me started was family. You know, my father, grandfather were both bow hunters. I grew up in Wisconsin, so I'd been shooting a bow since I was, I think, 3 or 4. Started bow hunting when I was 12 with I shot a recurve till, age 4 to 14 probably, and then
Really?
bought a compound and started killing stuff when I was 14. So,
Wow.
So I've been, I grew up in Wisconsin hunting whitetails, moved to Colorado about 25 years ago now. And, been hunting, pretty obsessed with elk hunting in the backcountry. But, I like to hunt elk, mule deer, bear, antelope, mountain goat. This year it'll be bighorn sheep. I drew a tag here in Colorado for that. So
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I love bow hunting. I'm a mechanical engineer. I worked for several other companies for about 25 years, designing, developing products before start my own company. Formed the company in 2016 and really launched it 2017. So about 7 years ago now. That's how long I guess I've been in the industry. With the company.
Bill, I just want to stop you for a second. Now, you said you were a mechanical engineer, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
All right. I just wanted to get that on the record. Our buddy Rob, I'm a civil engineer, and our buddy Rob rides me nonstop about it. So I wanted to make sure that he heard that.
Anyway, one of those long jokes that's going on in the show here.
So is Rob a mechanical engineer then, or what?
Oh, God, no.
No. All right. So your intro to hunting might have actually been not how everybody does. A lot of guys start out like a BB gun, a shotgun, they move into the rifle, they pick up, some type of archery early on. You actually started with archery and a traditional setup or a recurve setup, nonetheless. That's pretty unique. So over those years, like as you actually started to mature as a bow hunter specifically, obviously the gear, whether it's the bow itself, the broadheads in particular, did you have any bad experiences early on? Not necessarily with shot placement, but actually just an older design of broadheads that just wasn't getting it done.
Yeah, and I didn't solely bow hunt initially. I hunted. I loved hunting, and as a kid, we'd get dropped off at my buddy's farm for the weekend. This is before we had driver's licenses. We'd hunt all weekend. It was grouse, rough grouse, ducks, and deer. We were pretty much hunting, and shotgun for the grouse and ducks, and bows for the deer. But and then I rifle hunted as well, because you can kind of do both in Wisconsin. You can get buck tags for both, but when it got to a choice of one or the other, it became bow hunting for me. And now I've done solely bow hunting for about the last 15 years, I think. I haven't picked up a rifle and just bow hunted, shooting 10 to 20 animals a year with a bow typically. So yeah, I did have a bad experience though. There's probably a number of them when I was a teenager, I made a lot of, I shot at a lot of deer and missed a lot of deer. I didn't have a whole lot of discipline, early on, but, and, then I got pretty good at killing whitetails and had good success there. Moved to Colorado and, started elk hunting, and man, it was tough compared to whitetail. It was just a lot different. I was trying to apply my whitetail tactics, and they weren't working so great. I wasn't being really probably aggressive enough for elk, or I'd find a good looking place. For whitetail, you find a good looking area, a trail that's been used, and hang up a stand. You might have a whitetail walk by you, but elk hunting, the elk might have been there 3 days ago, but he might be 10 miles away today. So anyway, a bit of a learning curve in elk behavior, but also I had a shot, 5 years. I moved here in 99, and then in 2004 was actually my first shot on a good bull, and I hit a little far forward, hit the shoulder blade, and the broadhead failed to penetrate. That elk ran away with most of the arrows sticking out of it. So yeah, that broadhead failed, and it really bothered me. You guys maybe heard the story because I've told it many times, but I just decided I was going to apply mechanical engineering to get better at bow hunting and to make some better gear here. Research, test what's out there, and design my own broadheads, kind of if needed. And that was 20 years ago now, but that's what got me started down the path of broadhead design and development.
All right. We'll save a little bit more of that. Like I said, that'll be for the second topic once we get Chris into the game, and once we actually start, unveiling IronWill as a company and the product line. I like to just always dive into like just the background of your beginning stages as a hunter and as it progressed. Do you have like an early success story as an archery hunter in particular that really sticks out to you? Or, it doesn't matter what the game is. Maybe you had a hard lesson learned as an archery hunter, but you were able to learn something so valuable from that experience, and you actually been able to make a positive out of that moving forward.
Yeah, that's really why I love bow hunting, is because of the challenges there. And it took me, I think rifle hunting, I killed bucks from day one. When I was 12, 13, 14, 15, I shot bucks every year with the rifle. And bow hunting, it was a struggle for a few years to get it done. And when I did finally, it was so much more a sense of accomplishment. And then, I got to be where I targeted a buck that I'd seen kind of preseason. It was a 12 point by the Eastern count. It had stickers off its first points there, and I just hunted that. I hunted about every day of the season for that buck, and finally killed him. Probably about, I think it was like November 8th or something like that. But hunting said something like September 8th. And seen him a few times, finally killed him. And that was just a awesome sense of accomplishment to kind of, with bow hunting, you're just so close to the animal, and so much can go wrong as well. And it's so much, they can use their senses so much more than when you're a long ways away with a rifle. I just, I love the challenge and got hooked on it. In Wisconsin, I think I shot my 20th buck when I turned 20 years old.
Wow.
So it doesn't seem mathematically possible, probably, but in Wisconsin, you can party hunt. So I could fill out people's tags too. But I was pretty obsessed with bow hunting, and a lot of those were with the rifle, but some with the bow as well. So I loved hunting, still do, but now it's just a little different. I just focus on, Western big game primarily, although I do go back and hunt. Last year I hunted Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana, and Texas for whitetail. So I do a fair amount of whitetail hunting too.
Nice. Well, it sounds like you're keeping the freezer full. So at the end of the day, that's really what it is all about. So nicely done. All right, a couple of quick questions. Do you have any pre-hunt ritual or routine or anything like that you do before you head out into the woods?
Not really. Other than I try and I would say I kind of try and clear my head and focus that, hey, you're going hunting now, because especially like I found this to be true in more challenging hunts, that you gotta be focused on hunting and not, if other things are running through your head, you're not really paying attention to what's going on, you're gonna mess up. You're not gonna see that animal coming in or whatever. So I'd say if there's any pre-hunt ritual, it's probably that, to like clear my head, forget about all the other stuff going on, and focus. Okay, you're hunting now. You're in the moment here, watching what's going on. And I think that's just another reason why I love hunting and being in the wilderness, is like you're kind of forced to do what's right in front of you, whether it's, hike this mountain, get food and water for the day, or, stalk this, deer or elk. But yeah, stay focused on what's going on in the hunt for sure.
I like that. I mean, that's a very good answer, honestly, because it's such, you're speaking to the mindset, as a hunter, I mean, you owe it to the game to be in the moment, be ultra aware, because it's archery hunting is I don't want to say we take it for granted, because a lot of us have been doing it for a little bit longer now. It's not easy, and that's why we love it as hard as it is. I think that's why a lot of us, it really grabs hold of us. Maybe not everybody, but the guys that it does grab a hold on to, there's no turning back. It's such, you kind of touched on it. It's such like an intimate style of hunting, bringing these animals in 30 yards, 25 yards, 20 yards, a lot of times even closer. And then to be able to actually beat them in their home territory and execute a lethal shot, an ethical shot, if you would. It's, again, we may take it for granted, but that is not easy. So it's having that clear mindset, that positive attitude, walking in, feeling, if you kind of walk in with a negative attitude, like, I don't know if I'm going to see anything today. Well, maybe you won't, but it's all about that mindset, the preparation, it's all those hours off season, setting cameras, scouting. So, I mean, that was a very good answer. Who's the first person you call after a successful hunt?
Yeah, good question. It's usually a couple of buddies of mine that I'll, send photos out to. My wife and kids too. It can be all those for sure. Yeah, a couple of close buddies that I've hunted with a lot. I usually getting the photos. They understand the difficulty of the hunt and kind of appreciate it, or understand it, I guess, more. My wife and kids, though, they love to see I'm successful, and checking in with them too, for sure.
All right, I'm probably going to end it with this question, and then I'm going to tap in Chris, and we'll keep the show rolling. Obviously, now with your company, IronWill, social media, some people love it, they hate it. The overall picture, let's take the hunting industry as a whole, and from your experiences, like, how do you feel we're doing as a hunting community? Are we trending in a positive direction? Do you think there's a lot of things we can improve on, in general? Or do you think, like, the social media and overall all these aspects are bringing new hunters, new generations into the woods and continue the passion that we love?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's some good and bad with it, I'm sure. I think it's important that we all, I think people have to realize that when you post things to like Instagram, social media, it's kind of like you're hanging a billboard out for everybody to see. It's not just your buddies that are going to see it. So it's it's probably not, you don't want to show a bunch of bloody photos. It's like if a bunch of kids see it or whatever, that might be more sensitive to that, or women or guys too. It's like, you got to think, and I'm not the most sensitive guy, and I'm not always thinking about what other people think, but I could tell you I've experienced enough to know that not everybody appreciates seeing, the blood and guts that is part of hunting. So, I think there's no reason to put that stuff on social media. Show that to your buddy on the side in a photo, or, put it on a forum where people are maybe asking, for that, and they're there for the purpose of seeing, a blood trail, entrance shot, exit shot, whatever like that.
Yeah.
But I think cleaning it up is probably a good idea. For one, it gets policed, and you get shadow banned anyways if you're showing that stuff. So as a company, it's foolish to do that. But yeah, you got to think most of the world is non-hunters right now, unfortunately. So, we're a small percentage. We have to, there's a lot of people that are middle ground. They're not anti-hunters, but they're not hunters. And it's those people that, do carry the vote, on a lot of things.
Absolutely.
So I think it's important to not turn those guys off and and have them think hunters are, cruel, inhumane, all those other things, because they aren't going to understand the whole hunt. So I think it's kind of important what we post for that reason. Keep it, clean it up a bit. Talk about the whole hunt, the aspects of the hunt. Just the trophy photo. I know we love to see that because we want to show our buddies the deer we got. But it's really just it's part of the whole hunting lifestyle. I don't do it just to get that set of antlers. I love hunting, all the aspects, preparing for it, archery, shooting my bow, getting the meat, the whole deal. So I think telling the whole story is better as well on a lot of that stuff. So, that's just a few things that I've seen that I would, my opinion on things there.
No, we happen to totally agree with that. I will speak for Chris and Rob with that one. Without a doubt, you have to execute some common sense, simple things like the tongue hanging out. If you happen to have a broken piece of the arrow, try and remove that, cover the field dress cavity. You want to represent this animal that you just harvested in the most respectable manner possible. I mean, at the end of the day, that's, as hunters, that's what we try and preach. We ethical shots, practice shooting your bow, put the most ethical shot on. And at the end of the day, like you said, that grip and grin, the hunters and the hunting community will understand that because we know the months that it took to get to that point. But the minute that gets cycled to another platform or somebody who doesn't know the full entirety of it, you kind of, that can be construed so many different ways. So
Right.
Without a doubt, I mean, that is something we all, and that kind of falls on all of us. Like we all have, like I'm looking on Instagram now, we got like 15 people chiming in, all friends with different brands. That's kind of up to us as well to help police each other. Like if you see something like, hey, like maybe you should take that down, or maybe you should change the wording on that, because at the end of the day, if we don't have our backs, the antis or the other side, if you will, definitely won't. How about a positive though, from a business standpoint? What do you see trending in a good thing for let's say IronWill in general with the social media?
Yeah, for me, I don't think the company was taken off as quickly for sure without it. I had, when I started this company I didn't make money for 2 years. I was doing side work to get the company rolling. And so I was putting all the money into product development, manufacturing, and really no money into marketing. I still put very little money into marketing, but just having the social media, being able to post things on Instagram basically, and people seeing it and sharing it to their buddies or whatever, we grew, and then, got on some podcasts and things. And, I remember the day that, I saw, it was our first year in 2017. I saw like Joe Rogan, somebody named Joe Rogan ordered 36 broadheads. And I was wondering when I saw the order come through, I'm like, wow, I wonder if that's a real Joe Rogan. And then, he sends me a DM, said, hey, I heard your podcast. That's awesome what you're doing, developing these broadheads. And then he showed them on his, Instagram, and overnight I went from a couple thousand to 7,000, followers, I think. So there's definitely some good there. And then, Cam Haynes has showed our stuff a lot, and, that helped bump this up. And I'm not, I don't pay anybody to shoot our broadheads. So people ask me that a lot, like, oh, you're sponsoring Cam Haynes. I'm like, no, I like the guy. I've sent him free heads. We're friends, but no, he's just doing that to be a good dude helping me out. So,
That's good to know.
So, I mean, that's from a company standpoint, that's the positive, is that I've been able to get the word out to a lot of people about our products, and, and get to meet a bunch of people that way, connect with a lot of people that way. So, that's the positive out of it.
Yeah. In this industry, probably almost more than any connections, you can almost live and die by your connections or word of mouth at that point. So that's pretty cool. That's Joe Rogan, Cam Haynes. That's I can't promise the same return on investment from our show as that, but we'll do the best we can for it.
I mean, when it comes to outdoor podcasting, I mean, you know, it's basically there's the Joe Rogan show, and we're like right there. So we're not, you know, we can't promise you the same results, but we'll get you close.
Well, I mean, I believe you. I don't know any different.
All right. Well, I think I'm good for this segment, Chris. If you guys are ready, let's really start diving into IronWill, the product line, and really let's get some to the meat and potatoes of the show.
All right. So, I mean, it's probably a good time for an engineer to talk to an engineer about technical things. And yes, yeah. Rob's sitting right in front of me, so I'm gonna keep hitting on that because he gets on me all the time about it. But so getting into IronWill, I really wanted the first question I want to ask you is what was really that moment, that spark that you said, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, it was really when I had the broadhead fail and then elk shoulder blade and spent the next 5 days looking for that bull. I had a lot of time to think, and you know, I kept looking at the broadhead. You know, I never found my arrow, but the ones left in my quiver, you know, I took it out, look at it, and I looked at all the potential failure modes to it, and you know, I'd been, you know, so I just maybe brag about myself for a second here. So I graduated #1 in my class out of University of Wisconsin. So, you know, straight 4.0 GPA. I loved engineering, and I learned it at a high level, and I went to work for companies where I was doing, you know, I was a top performer in whatever was the big problem, product development, you know, I'd get it and I'd do a good job on it. So I was used to developing products at a very high level and applying the best engineering tools. And then when I had that broadhead fail and elk shoulder blade, I'm looking at this broadhead and thinking, man, bow hunting is so important to me, and elk hunting is so important to me. I mean, I'm just so driven by it, and yet I'm using this junk gear here. You know, it was like kind of a light bulb went on, like, man, these things are junk. I can just see why it would have failed. And, you know, pretty quickly realized I'm going to just see what else is out there, see what research has been done, test a bunch of heads. And then it didn't take me long after starting to do that I realized, man, applying some good modern engineering, this can be way better than it is right now. So, you know, it was within months really of that failure that I decided, yeah, I can engineer something better than this. I need to put some time into it.
Okay. So kind of take us through your first year in business. I imagine as a small business, you touched on it a little bit, but kind of go through maybe the struggles of starting this business and kind of getting it off the ground in the first year.
Yeah. It was more than a year before it really happened. So I started developing broadheads I think I had my first prototypes in 2006 after a lot of design analysis work. And then I worked through a number of different steels and changed the design a fair amount. And I think it was 2013. I think it was 7 years later when I had the design kind of done. And then I hunted with it for 3 years after that. You know, prior to that, myself, my brothers, I have 4 brothers that bow hunt too. And my friends were shooting them each year. You know, I'd have them record, like, where was the hit? You know, how was the blood trail, all this stuff. And so, you know, I had a lot of help in the development. I have a brother, Tim, that shot probably 40 deer with this head, you know, in development. He did a lot of help with me there too. Anyway, I got the design to where I felt like, okay, this is good. This is performing well. I shot a couple bulls that year. I shot one. It was coming out. It wasn't that far away, but it was swinging at kind of an arc as I shot, and it went through the hind quarter and came out the brisket. So it went full length on an elk. Like, I don't know. That's at least 5 feet, I would say. It stuck out. Yeah. And that broadhead had already been through a cow. So a week prior, I shot a cow. 54 yards, pass through shot, stuck in the soft dirt. And, she walked a couple steps and dropped. And, at that time, a 54-yard pass through on a big cow elk is a pretty good penetration as well. But then to shoot that same head through that elk and get that far, I didn't mean to grab that broadhead, but that's the one I ended up grabbing in a quick moment. So, and there was a guy with me on the hunt. We just become friends, a younger guy, and we both killed bulls, and we both helped each other pack them out 7 miles on that hunt. So, it's kind of a friendship formed in pain there for that. But anyway, he had a marketing background. And he's like, "What are those broadheads you're using?" I said, just some I developed." He's like, "That's crazy. They penetrated that far. They look like new and they're still sharp and all that." And really, so I'd already, I developed it, got it where I think it needed to be, but the costs were so high to make it. I didn't think it was going to be possible. I knew the cost was going to be, have to be over 100, or selling price would have to be over $100. And even then, a majority of that was going to be the materials manufacturing processes. So not much overhead to cover the whole rest of the company. And so anyway, he saw it. I'm like, "Yeah, if you want to be a partner, you can do the marketing website side and let's launch it." So we did that in 2016. And I oversaw the product development, manufacturing, and he was working on, the website and the, sales marketing side of things. But really the struggle there was, the price is pretty high. We came out with them at $99.95 for a 3-pack. And honestly, we weren't making any money with that. I don't know if you know, but the broadhead manufacturers and a U.S. manufacturer has to pay 11% of sales for for wildlife restoration, the Pittman-Robertson Act, that excise tax. I had heard of that tax. I didn't realize I was the guy paying it. So what I thought was going to be like a 20% gross margin to start out was now a 9%. And so so it was a struggle to make enough money. And honestly, we really didn't. But, I was an engineer. I'd worked for 25 years. I'd already had a house and a shop and acreage that I had paid off. 3 of my kids were in college, so that made it a little bit rough. But anyway, I didn't have to make a lot of money. And I actually worked as an expert witness as a mechanical design expert for a big law firm, which was not a lot of hours of work, but it paid well. So that's what kind of paid the bills for me for a few years before I was able to, pull a paycheck from the company. So, that was a struggle, being able to make such a high-end product for a low enough cost that people would want to buy it. But, honestly, that $100 price point, it seemed like a lot, but I think once people got them and used them and realized, for all the work you do to get ready for that bow hunt, $30 to $40 for a broadhead that's going to perform that much better, is worth it.
Now, I want to get into your first design. Now, if you could kind of describe the first broadhead that you designed and brought to market.
Yeah. Well, I didn't bring it to market, but the first one I designed was it was a really thick blade, because I figured that blade kind of bent or broke on the shoulder blade, or the ferrule did. And after testing I was always a 3-blade guy too. And then after testing a bunch of heads and looking at penetration, I realized 2 blades is going to penetrate the best. But it's got to be durable enough. The 2 blades I was testing were just, chipping the tip or breaking or bending off. So I thought a 2-blade, but thicker would be better. So my first iteration was like a 94 thousandths thick single 2-blade head. And it was durable. It was strong. Although I put so much weight into the blade that I'd used an aluminum ferrule initially. And then the ferrule just didn't stand up. I knew I couldn't use aluminum. I had to go to like grade 5 titanium for the 100 grain version. So I thinned the blade up to 62 thousandths, which turned out to be, better overall. It pushed through with a little less force, but yet plenty strong for great impact strength on bone. Well, not with initial steel, but I went through like 5 different steels until I settled on, I said on S7 for 2 years, and then I decided I was about to go to market with that. And I thought, I'm going to try A2. I think I can actually get a better, sharper edge. And so I switched to A2, and then I spent another year working on the heat treat to get that as like highest impact toughness I could. So anyway, and then also through that time, I added the bleeder. My brother, Tim, really pushed for that. He was killing more animals than I was with them. And occasionally we'd get a poor blood trail, like no blood. And, not a lot, but once in a while. And I think just that single slice through can just close up too easily. If depending on when it cuts through and how the hide gets tensioned or how the muscle lays, sometimes it's just like a zero blood problem with those. Whereas when you have a cross cut, it always opens up the holes, at least somewhat. And often it opens them up, pretty well. I didn't want to add it initially. I was worried about, structural integrity, really, of having to put a cross hole through and all that. But in the end, it worked. And I did 3 or 4 iterations on that. I just was not happy with the bleeder. I finally came up with a way to set it back far enough in the blade and the ferrule, the main blade and the ferrule, to not affect impact toughness at all. It also had minimal effect on penetration being set back further because you had that big slice. You had most of that slice of the main blade all the way through before that crosscut came. So in the end, I'm really happy with it. I think it's a big improvement. But I kind of fought it for a few years before I really figured it out there.
All right. So 10 years in from first design to really bringing it to market. Now, from bringing your first, what was the actual first broadhead? Was it a double bevel or a single bevel that you brought?
It was a double bevel. It was our V100, V125, which we still sell today. But those were those were 2 products at our initial launch.
Now, coming from the double bevel, bringing it to market, what was kind of your inspiration to say, I need to build off of this and switching to what is a very popular design now, especially from IronWill, the single bevels. What really kind of motivated you to make a design change like that?
Yeah, a lot of it was just what customers wanted. And I still kind of just design what I really want next in the product. But I mean, I do listen to what customers have to say. And I do, I like to be challenged on things, right? If I think something's best and somebody has a different opinion, please tell me about it. I like to keep an open mind. I like to think through things and test them out. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you're right, kind of thing. So, that's really why we went from the V series to the S series, which is still a double bevel, but it's a solid blade. The V series has a bit of a hiss to it, or a shish. Shh, shh. You can hear a shish kind of as it flies through the air. Our S series is super quiet in flight. I didn't think it was important, but we had enough customers that wanted it. I designed it, tested it, did sound testing with microphones. Yeah, it is quieter. And it's very strong. It's a stronger blade, actually. So it ended up being, probably a better product. And that was just some challenges from customers, Aaron Snyder and a lot of other customers that, wanted it at the time. The single bevel thing is something I had tested previously with other companies' broadheads and just decided it's a weaker edge. All that pressure on one side, you can bend or break out that edge more easily. And that's what I saw when I was testing, other companies' broadheads out there. And I was really, initially, I just wanted to cut through bone and stay intact. And that was the primary thing I wanted to do. And I thought a double bevel with that pressure on both sides was a stronger edge for doing that. And I still think it is a stronger edge for doing that. But if you have a single bevel, and initially I tried the 25 degree, I talked to Dr. Ed Ashby about it, got his input. He really liked the 25 degree. I thought it seemed a bit thin, but all my initial prototypes were 25 degrees and I tested that. But, and we give a lifetime warranty if you shoot out or through an animal. And I was chipping out the edge when I would hit really heavy bone, it would damage the edge a little bit. Otherwise, just like rocks in the dirt, we're breaking that edge away more so than they would a double bevel. So anyway, I settled on a 32-degree edge, and then I felt like I could go through bone, split bone really well with it. And I initially made it to, I thought so many customers want it. I'm going to make it, test it, and then give them the data and say, hey, look, a double bevel's better. That's what I thought I was going to do. And in the end, what I ended up doing is making it, testing it, realizing, yeah, this rotation through the animal is kind of cool. It opens up holes pretty good, does some pretty good trauma. If I make it with this edge angle, I can make it strong enough to overcome the issues I had with single bevel. And then something other that's kind of cool is I decided to add single bevel bleeders to it because I'd gotten to really like bleeders in that crosscut hole opening. And that was kind of unique. I'd never seen a single bevel with bleeders and what that hole shape looked like. You know, it's almost like a square hole with that through the hide. So, and I thought, well, that's kind of cool and unique. And I'm really not finding the negatives that I thought I might. You know, the penetration was great because that's another thing is like I thought the pressure on those bevels and it having to rotate through the animal could actually limit penetration. But in practice, I haven't seen that. I think the arrow's already rotating. It just keeps kind of rotating that same direction. And they're zipping through animals really well too. So basically I couldn't find any reason not to bring it out to market. And it's performing really well. So that's the story of how that one came to market.
Okay. So now I guess kind of in your own words, if you want to just break it down real quick, maybe the advantages or disadvantages of a single bevel versus a double bevel and why maybe the single bevel is more popular with some hunters than others.
Yeah. Only because, Bill, we're getting into such a depth right now about broadheads. In case there's a new listener or a new hunter, I kind of just want to break down some of the terms like a single bevel, double bevel, even bleeders, without going too far into it. But I want everybody just to kind of understand truly what you're talking about because it's all such great info that you're giving us here tonight.
Yeah. Well, first I'll say that a lot of times people call a 2-blade head a single bevel when it's not. And I see that from some, you know, semi-famous people out there or influencers. They'll go from a mechanical to or 3-blade to a 2-blade or 2-blade with bleeders, and they'll refer to it as a single bevel when they'll say, I'm getting way more penetration now that I've gone to a single bevel, but they might actually be showing a double bevel. So some of it's become like, it's become kind of a bit of a buzzword or you know, what's cool for getting more penetration. And sometimes they're actually replying to like a cut on contact 2-blade, you know, that may or may not have bleeders. But so a little bit is just kind of people calling that type of a head a single bevel. So I'll throw that out there because I saw that quite a bit early on. But when it comes down to it, and I think really you do get better penetration with that 2-blade cut on contact all the way to the tip than you do a 3-blade or for certain a mechanical because there's very little force to cut through the hide if it's very sharp and durable and everything there. But to actually get to what truly is a single bevel or double bevel, the edge itself, you know, most knives are double bevel where you're going to have a grind on both sides, creating that bevel. You can grind them back and forth and hone both sides until you get a very sharp edge. And it's, you know, kind of a, you know, pyramid shape, you know, across the thickness of the blade like that. Single bevel, you do all the grind on one side. So one side of the blade, I'll get my camera right here. One side of the blade is flat and the other side, you know, has the bevel on it. So, and what happens there is, so anyway, you grind on one side only. You're just taking the burr off the backside. So it's totally flat. Now what happens when that cuts, we'll start with a double bevel. When a double bevel cuts, there's pressure kind of equally on both sides of that bevel as it cuts through. And that's how most knives are made. So you can cut straight through meat or, you know, whatever you're cutting. A single bevel, there are knives that are single bevel, but they're kind of for shaving cheese or something like that. It's hard to, if you take a single bevel knife and you have one, try to cut through a piece of cheese, it drives you to kind of push it to one side because that pressure's on that one side of the bevel. So it's going to kind of push the blade over. Well, if you have a a bevel one way on the top of the blade, another way on the bottom, it creates a rotation of that blade through an animal. So the benefit to the single bevel then is that rotation can kind of open up holes. It's just not a straight sliced cut like you would get with a double bevel. Double bevel, the arrow pretty much stops rotating when that broadhead hits, and it's just going to cut straight through. And if it's a single bevel with bleeders, you're going to get like a cross-shaped slice through the hide, the organs, everything else. And single bevel, you're going to get that rotation. So if you just got a single bevel with no bleeders, it gives almost an S cut through the hide and through some of the organs. And if you add that bleeder, it can, open it up more of an oval or a square shape at times. So that's the benefit to a single bevel. The benefit I say to a double bevel is it's got inherently a bit stronger edge. I like, it's got a really good combination of sharpness and durability because of the way you can grind and hone both sides, and then the pressure's equal on both sides. So I feel like it's inherently a bit stronger edge. So depending on the steel and the broadhead you get in the steel, it might be a much better option. But I think with our steel, we can, with our A2 tool steel, we do a cryogenic treatment, triple temper to get the max performance out of it. It has great impact strength. I don't think there's any problem with the single bevel, with our steel. So they both work really well.
Okay. So now I have a question in another direction. What is your most popular selling broadhead right now? I mean, besides the single bevel 100 wides, obviously.
Well, we just came out with our single bevel wides in 100 and 125 this month. So that's what we got requested the most for in the past year. We'd already done our standard heads, our S series, then our single bevel, and then our wides, which were a double bevel. And now we did our wide single bevel. So that's what we just came out with. Our overall top seller, it's had been our S series. Up until this past year, the single bevels edged it out a little bit, although they're very close. Our S series and single bevel are very close. A lot of people like both of those heads for sure.
All right. So you've been close to 10 years now with products on the market.
7. Yep.
Close enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now
I'm an engineer, so I use exact numbers.
Oh, hit you with your
wow. All right.
Make you
All
count
right.
the seven that you can, Chris.
All right. You got me with that.
Oh,
All right.
mechanical engineers use exact numbers. Maybe not.
All right, so I'll take that because usually it's just a point. All right, dig here. All right, so 7 years in now, where do you kind of see things going for IronWill in maybe the next 5 years, 10 years? Like, what are some longer term goals?
Yeah, I can tell you the last 2 years I've spent a lot of time on arrow flight. I felt like, for bow hunting, there's 2 probably equally important things. That's excellent, good arrow flight and penetration. And I feel like most of the arrow flight stuff is directed at target archery. Most of the research that's been done, a lot of the stuff you see out there is, a lot of the pros that are giving tips and things. A lot of that stuff applies more to target archery and not always so well to hunting. And then on the penetration side, so I've spent, 20 years working on the penetration side with developing broadheads and getting them sharp and maintaining that edge. So I feel like our broadheads are doing an excellent job with penetration, zipping through, and putting a little more work into the arrow flight side, so that people understand how arrow flight's different with broadheads on the front and what kind of things can make you a lot more effective, a lot more accurate, especially like a Western big game hunter where, if you can make shots 50 to 80 yards, you just open up your opportunities, multiple times. And, when I moved to Colorado, my 40 yards was my limit. I wouldn't shoot beyond there, but I've pushed that, and I passed up a lot of elk and mule deer at 55, 60 yards in those early years. But I realized if I can push my effective range to 60 yards, all of a sudden I have a lot more opportunities. And it's really been the case. Don't do it if you haven't practiced a lot. But I've got a range outside my window right here in the foothills where I shoot to 50 to 100 yards daily with broadheads and in the wind and all conditions to really try and dial that in. But anyway, that's your question. I've been an adjunct instructor of mechanical engineering at the University of Colorado for several years. One of the faculty directors for their senior design project class. The last 2 years, I sponsored projects on really improving aeroflight with fixed blade broadheads. So it was a lot of fluid dynamic modeling, a lot of empirical testing, but looking at vane designs, looking at a lot of the aero, parameters to try and better understand and really from an engineering standpoint, apply the science, prove things out through engineering, designed experiments, and then be able to have some good data to share with our customers on how you can be more accurate while you're bow hunting.
Okay. Now I have one more kind of off-topic question. The name IronWill. How did you settle on that?
Yeah, good question. And actually, I didn't come up with it. It was initially I had a partner, Eric, that, and so I met him up in the high mountains in a wilderness area. I was hunting solo and ran into him, and I was kind of not happy. He found my secret spot, but he's 20 years younger than me, a young guy, and pretty green. And I saw you shooting like a bow from the 1970s that he got from his grandpa or something. And I said, hey, there's some elk here. I think I blew them out, but if you want to hunt this basin, go for it. I'll hike the next one over. Anyway, a little bit of a hunting story here too, but I walk away. He's checking out where I camped the night before, where I backpacked in and camped and just kind of checking it out. And a bull comes down the hill by him. And so I'd been calling a little bit just at first light to see if the bulls were still there or not. Because I'd blown out the herd the night before and I figured they're all gone. But a few satellites were hanging around. Anyway, one of these satellite bulls, 5-point, came down to where I had just been calling, and he shoots it at 30 yards away. Anyway, long story short, I ended up seeing him later, giving him a ride to his truck, and we became friends and hunted together a few years later. And then we got those bulls together in 2014. And he saw me kill two elk that year, and then a bull the next year with that broadhead, and let's take it to market. So initially he was kind of asking me all the questions, trying to figure out, he wanted to know the company. He wanted to tell the company's story, and he was asking me about it. And I just said, I told him the whole story, tried to kill that bull. The broadhead failed. I decided I was determined I was going to make a better broadhead. I was also determined I was going to become a better elk hunter. I started learning about elk behavior. I started training like I was an Olympic athlete. Started doing high altitude training, hiking, biking all the time. I went all in on becoming a better elk hunter and just had, an iron will to do it. And when he heard me tell the whole story, and he kind of wrote it up into kind of our story kind of thing. And then he came up with a few ideas of a company name based on the story. And one of them was IronWill. So that one just rang true to me. I just thought, that's about right. I think it's I was very determined to make a better product, become a better elk hunter. And I think to be at the top of your game in bow hunting, you got to have an iron will. You got to be determined and dedicated to it. And so it just rang true with me for what I wanted the company to be about.
Okay. All right. So now I do want to get into this topic that we briefly spoke about earlier. So anybody that watched the Africa episode, everybody knows that we were using IronWill broadheads. We went there on a bow hunt. Now, in your opinion, the one thing that we noticed is with well-placed shots using both the S100s and the SB100s on animals like the kudu, wildebeest, even Nyala, the blood trails were, just like you were describing in the early designs, that blood trails weren't, as present, or we really weren't getting a blood trail. Now, in your mind, what do you think might be a factor in that scenario? Because this is something that we experienced, and I do want to point out to everybody that hunting North American game and hunting African big game are two different experiences. African animals are by far the most survivable, toughest animals on the planet. So is it a testament to the toughness of these animals, or is it something that perhaps on these, beginning into the thicker skin games, we should have used a wider broadhead? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, a few questions for you. Did you get pass-throughs?
Yes.
Okay. And how far did they go after they shot?
My kudu went maybe 125 meters. My wildebeest actually went 4 kilometers.
Oh, wow.
The wildebeest did bleed a little bit. We did have it wasn't like a red carpet, but we did have a blood trail that we could follow, but it was very sparse.
What is that in yards? I gotta ask.
It's the same thing. It's about the same thing, Dave.
All right. Well, I'm not an engineer. I didn't
So where did you hit that one that went 4 kilometers?
The wildebeest, it was right behind the front shoulder. Once we recovered the animal, we actually opened it up, looked at everything. Both lungs were hit, and even my PH could not explain it. He said, I'm at a loss for words.
Both lungs were cut.
Yes.
Yeah, that's crazy. Unless they can run 4 kilometers in like a minute or something, a couple minutes. That's pretty crazy. I haven't hunted African game. I know we've got a ton of customers that do, because I talk to them all the time. So I would say that in general, what I'm hearing is we're getting great penetration, pass-throughs on Cape Buffalo, things like that. Relatively quick kills in general. I would say that we've had a number of people say good blood trails with our bleeder, with our S100, S125, or single bubble 100, 125 with bleeders. I don't know African game that well. I know in general that their hides are thicker, their bones are heavier, their anatomy is a bit different. I could say that some things that some kind of known potential, like a high double lung shot, when it's above center line on the animal, that can be one that doesn't have the great blood trail, because, the lungs often will collapse and bleed. And, by the time much blood gets out of there, it's also running down the sides.
Yeah.
So it can sometimes take longer for the blood to show up, so a high lung shot or, a gut shot can be poor. But yeah, and you didn't see a difference between double bevel and single bevel there.
No. And these were low lung hits. And
okay.
Again, we got spectacular penetration. So it may just be a testament to the toughness of African game. But yeah. I did want to take the opportunity to pick your brain on that, because these were results that we saw in the field, and
yeah,
if there was something that maybe we could change for next year's hunt, if maybe stepping up to the wides, or maybe stepping from the 100 to the 125. In your mind, what do you think might be a good direction for somebody who's going to Africa that didn't experience what we experienced? If it's their first trip and you want to set them up for success, what's something that you might suggest?
Yeah, well, the wides, give a wider hole. They give generally that bigger hole stays more open and more blood on the ground. And I shoot the wides a lot for whitetails, bears, pigs, shots where you're typically going to be under 40. If your shots over there are going to be under that too, I wouldn't hesitate to shoot the wides. We had a guy shoot our wide with bleeder and get a passer on a Cape Buffalo, and the arrow was on the other side of the animal. And it was kind of funny that he didn't pick the right broadhead that was recommended. He got confused and ordered the wide with bleeders, but still got all the way through one. Anyways, the wides have been penetrating great. They're not my first choice if I'm going to shoot caribou or elk or antelope at a very long range. I mean, they can fly well at that range, but they're not as forgiving. So you got to be a little more dialed, a little better form, all those things. But close range shots, they can definitely open up holes. Our new wide single bevel, 125 is what I shoot. 125s a lot. I've killed a lot of animals with that in the last few years, and that's been some pretty amazing blood trails and penetration through bone, spine, everything. The bear I shot this year was a frontal shot, and it went through the breastbone, basically through the heart. And at the angle I was at, it went up through the spine at an angle, and the blade was sticking out right next to the tailbone. So it went through a lot of. Wow. It's a big boar. It was a 320-pound boar. 19 and a half inch skull. So a big stocky boar. And it went through a lot of spine at an angle with that wide single bevel. And, dropped the bear right there. And yeah, the head looked like new yet after all that bone. So they penetrate great, and they definitely put bigger holes in them. But I would say that, our S100, S125, generally we hear people, we more often hear people say, great blood trail, quick kill. Because I feel like our heads, the edge retention's really good. So they slice all the way through. They're not pushing any tissue aside. We've heard this from guys that have independently tested ours with others and looked at the organs and everything. We get full width cuts all the way through animals, where a lot of heads get dull after the hide or rib, and then they're pushing tissue after that. And that can be a case where they don't bleed very well and don't give you a very good blood trail, and they could take longer to die when that happens. We don't have that issue, so I feel like they're gonna slice as much as possible for the size head you're using. But there can be things like location on the animal, or sometimes close to a shoulder, that muscle will be forward. You'll shoot through, and then the muscle cover that hole back up on the way back. That can kind of plug up holes too. But those are some things that can happen.
I did mention that, and I want to chime in real quick, because it sounds like on that one animal, Chris, unfortunately, you just came across possibly one of those like anomalies in the archery hunting world, where it literally could have been something as simple as like Bill just touched on, a piece of organ, tissue, fat, literally was just severed and traveled down, and maybe it plugged that exit hole, and that maybe could have been the only reason for a lack of blood trail. That will happen on deer, 100, like just even whitetails.
Oh, without a doubt, Dave.
Yeah,
without a doubt. I was rifle hunting back in 2014. I shot a doe with a 30-06, and a piece of fat plugged up the hole. And this was a rifle. There was zero blood. Mm-hmm. So that does happen. So any number of things could have happened.
100%. Yeah.
So moving forward, I do want to ask you this on lighter skinned North American games such as whitetail, antelope, anything like that. What would be your suggestion to a bow hunter going on any hunts like that for their broadhead selection?
Yeah, for antelope, I'm typically doing our S series. I'd say antelope, mule deer, elk, caribou are kind of all in the category where I can get long shots. I potentially would get long shots. And, I practice a lot, so people might think it's unethical, but I'll kill a bull at 80 yards if I get the shot. I've killed my biggest bull at 82, but conditions were perfect. It was standing there broadside, and I made a hard shot at 82, and that arrow zipped through, and, it was 20 yards past him. And he took off running and dropped, right there. So, it's, I use those because I'm totally confident in my ability to make that length, that shot, because I can shoot tight groups with our V series, S series, and single bevel. All of our standard width heads, to me, fly really well at long range. I can shoot our vented to 100 too. I just know they aren't as forgiving. My groups aren't as tight, and we have some customers that will struggle to get them to shoot well, at 60 plus yards. They're not as forgiving. So it's more of a distance thing. But antelope, if you put an arrow through an antelope, they lay down and die. They're not the toughest animal either. So I've never had a problem where I'm like, I can't blood track this antelope, because I'll shoot and I'll see him go a little ways and just, lay down. Bears, whitetails can be a different story. They can be, and elk too. If my shots are going to be closer, a lot of times I have a mixed quiver. If I'm elk hunting and I might sit over water for the afternoon, or I just know I'm in thick cover and the shot's going to be close, I'll put our wides in for elk as well. I've killed I've zipped right through elk and got quick kills with those. So but for whitetails, people say our broadheads are overkill for whitetails, and I used to kind of think that too. I mean, yeah, they kind of are, but at the same time, whitetails are the most likely to move. I'm more likely to make a bad shot on a whitetail than an elk, a caribou, a bear, anything else, because of how quickly they can move. And some of that's hunting whitetails in Texas, where they're all keyed up and stuff too. But anyways, our broadheads, the nice thing there is that whatever shot angle, you're probably going to go pass through. Quartering on through the shoulder. I've shot two of my last bucks in Wisconsin have been quartering on shots, because I knew when they got perfectly broadside, they were going to win me. So I just shot them walking, quartering to, pounded it right through the shoulder blade, buried in the dirt on the other side of them, and I dropped over dead. So that's what having a really durable, sharp head can do, and that's with our wides. Our wide double bevel 2 years ago, and then last year was our wide single bevel, zip right through. So yeah, it's kind of up to the person and what they feel confident in. Some guys don't want to have a real wide head; they feel better with a little more compact. And our S series or single bevel are great choices. My personal favorite right now is probably our wide single bevel, but I like our wide double bevel as well for deer. Put a bigger hole through them, especially like I shot a few bucks last year, but one of them, he took off at the shot, and I got a square through the liver, and he went out 80 yards and stopped, and then he walked really slowly about 10 more yards. I could see he was hurting pretty bad. Pulled up my binoculars. Yep, square in the liver. But he only went about 10 more yards hurting and laid down there. And so that's the advantage when you don't make a perfect shot. A bigger cut does more trauma, whether it's through the liver or the guts. Put him down quickly. Quicker kill or a quick follow-up, stalk in, get that follow-up shot. So anyway, that's what I recommend for those.
Okay. So we're going to kind of open this up to the audience for some questions. And I do have a couple questions, and before we really get too deep into it, John asked a question, and it's kind of a segue into something I want to start asking about. Do you guys make a tomahawk? Or have you thought?
I designed an axe actually with Jordan Jonas. He won alone. I don't know what season it was, 8 maybe 6. Yeah. Anyway, he's the one that shot a moose with the recurve bow, and then he killed a wolverine with an axe. If you saw that, I had his axe for a while. We got to be friends. I had his axe. I did a CAD. I drew it up in a CAD model. It's one that he had kind of made. It's a Siberian single bevel axe actually, but we were kind of working together to maybe get some made, and I didn't have the time to put into it because I was designing single bevel broadheads at the time and things like that. So I've got one designed up, but no, I don't haven't come out with it yet.
Let's finish with the knives at the end. I'm gonna invoke some producer privileges here and start the Q&A segment because I have a list going here, and I'm just curious. The vented heads. I think we touched on it earlier because you had mentioned like testing with microphones. In all honesty, did you notice a difference in an increase in volume with the vented heads as opposed to with solid head?
So I'd say our V series
Mm-hmm.
Are the loudest. They have small vents in them. And there's separated, so there's actually two or four vents in the main blade. And those smaller vents seem to be a little louder, and this will vary a lot depending on your speed of your arrow, the rotation of your arrow. You know, they may be very quiet, but they may have a pretty good hiss to them. Our solid heads are dead quiet. The university testing we were just doing, they're down there comparable to field points. So if you're concerned about sound, our S series single bevel are very quiet. Our wide series have larger vents. Our wide 100, wide 125 have larger vents, and those are relatively quiet compared to the V series. And yeah, my friend Dan Staton, who does Elk Shape, he just called me up a couple days ago and was testing our new wide single bevel 125 vented, and he was worried about sound too. But his feedback was, man, they're quiet. We recorded them, we listened to them, they're quiet. I'm going to use that for elk this year. So anyway, I'd say our wide vented are relatively quiet for that size of a broadhead and everything. It's, I got a bunch of sound testing that could show you that it doesn't really matter, especially under 40 yards. You get the bow noise and this ringing of the bow noise, and then the arrow's relatively quiet, and then it hits the animal. So if he didn't react to all that bow noise and ringing, and there's not really much time for him to, and it's quiet, and the arrow noise is quieter than all that bow noise. Man, from all the data I've looked at, I can't believe that a vent or not vent in a blade is going to matter at all for whitetail ranges, in my experience.
My next question would be from a design standpoint, why is there a vented option as opposed to a fully solid broadhead? Like what is the reason behind the vent?
Yeah, just to get the weight down. I didn't want to thin up the blades. So the wide, we initially came out with a wide solid blade that was 150 grain. And I could have had a wide, a lot of people have asked for, hey, I want a wide, solid 100 grain head. Well, the blade would be very thin. And really the impact, the tip is where you need all the impact strength. So I didn't want to make it any thinner. I wanted to have that 62 thousandths thick, point tip to it, and set those vents back so they had no structural, so they had kind of a minimal effect on the structure of it for that high strength, bone impact. So the vents are really just there to get the weight down, and because I wanted to keep the thickness of the blade to have the impact strength up front.
Okay. My next question would be, again, we like to keep a new hunter, second-year hunter, novice hunter. Maybe they're making a fix from mechanical heads to a fixed head where there's a good chance you're actually going to have to induce some broadhead tuning to your arrow setup. If you had to explain your broadhead tuning, simply, what would be the simplest way to do a broadhead tune with your IronWills?
Yeah, and I don't necessarily do it what you might call a broadhead tune. What I do is, and I help customers with this all the time. So if you're ever shooting our heads and you have any problems with flight, call our main number, talk to tech support, and we'll walk you through it. But it's pretty simple that we want to make sure you're kind of optimally spined to a little bit stiff. And if you're not sure about that, we have charts on our website, IronWill Outfitters.com, where we've analyzed every point in there. It'll have draw poundage and then arrow length, and it'll give you a recommended spine. And then for the arrows we make, it'll tell you your total arrow weight and FOC as well. But those are all going to be optimal to stiff on the spine. For target archery, it doesn't matter if you're under spine, and that's an issue a lot of people will end up with. See if I got an arrow here to show you that. if you're underspined, your arrow can come out of the bow and be, excessively flexing all the way down to the target. And for target archery, it doesn't really matter. You can shoot good groups, sometimes even a little better groups being underspined. It can vary, but that's not going to be good for bow hunting. You don't want that. For one, you want all the momentum in a straight line at impact. So you want that arrow going straight. And whenever you're flexing up and down like that blade at the tip is going to have some angle to the airflow, and it's going to open up your group. So first thing is be optimally spined to a bit stiff. The next thing I'll say is have enough vein at the back of your arrow. And this is like one of the prototypes from a university study. But what I found, this is the IronWill Hybrid Hunter vein that performed really well in the first year study. I like a vein that's 0.55 to 0.58 inches tall. These high profile veins do a nice job of stabilizing the arrow. And I probably don't have enough time to talk totally about what stability is, but basically if the arrow's not going perfectly straight, it'll quickly pull it back on to going straight. And if you've got small target heads, it's become the fad to go with shorter target heads, maybe do 4 of them. I can tell you that does not stabilize broadheads nearly as well as higher profile veins. Night and day difference. So you will shoot more accurately. I'm not saying you can't get by with it, but you're going to have to be, your tune's going to have to be better. Your form's going to have to be better. Everything's going to have to be better. So anyway, enough vein, properly spined. And the third thing is just a relatively well-tuned bow. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but what that means is that your arrow's coming straight when it goes out of the bow. And, you can paper tune it to get pretty close. And, watch some videos on our YouTube channel, and I'll go into more detail on it, but we'll sometimes have customers shoot a bare shaft versus a flet shaft at 20, 30 yards and see if they're hitting together or not. And that gives you a good clue of how that arrow is coming out of your bow. It's kind of a next level to check your tune. But
okay,
if I do those things, screw a broadhead on, it's going to fly well. That's been my experience.
Fair enough. I'm going to wrap this up right now, and then we can open up to anybody else. You did mention earlier, about the Ashby Foundation. Obviously, that could very easily lead into the whole Ranch Fairy rabbit hole. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole. But as far as the Ashby Foundation, mechanical advantage, maybe talking about some of the wider broadheads, like where do you see IronWill? Do you happen to align with some of the elements of the Ashby Foundation, or even for yourself, like do you shoot the wider heads that maybe aren't mechanically advantaged, but they're still producing? And the last question, just to wrap it all up, with if you had to pick, like for myself, I shoot 60 pounds, white-tailed deer. I would say my average kill shot's 20 to 25 yards. What would be like an ideal setup that you would build for me if you could?
Yeah, for an arrow or broadhead or the whole thing.
We don't have to go too crazy about it. I mean, I shoot a 300 spine, so knowing that I shoot maybe like a stiffer spine at 300, drawing 60 pounds, you're like, what do you think would be a good IronWill fit for that matchup? If anybody needs to be in the same ballpark. Yeah,
what I kind of recommend in general is 450 to 550 grains. I think is a good weight hunting arrow setup. And if you're leaning more towards closer shots and wanting more penetration, lean more towards the higher end of that. And if you're wanting more trajectory, a flatter trajectory for longer range shooting, 3D shooting or whatever along with it, then you might go towards, the lower end of that. I think, the weight doesn't matter. I mean, the weight, increasing mass will give you a little more penetration. That's some place where I vary a bit, Dr. Ed Ashby, a good guy. I've spent, quite a bit of time talking to him. We agree on a lot of things. We agree about how important durability is, sharpness, things like that. And, structural integrity of the whole arrow. There's a few things that don't really jive with the physics there. And one of them is like a 650 grain threshold for bone breaking. Well, and really it's if you talk to him, he just said that's where he saw with his setup a longbow, shooting buffalo, Cape buffalo, Asian buffalo. That's where he saw a higher percentage of passing through heavier bone. But that gets applied to modern compound bows by people. And it's really more of a continuous improvement with heavier arrows, but there's no need to go to 650 grains. I can tell you that I shoot around 500 grains a lot, and I've, passed through that big bullet, 82 yards, and the arrow was 20 yards past it. I've shot through the knuckles on big hogs with arrows that are 500 grains. So the broadhead actually makes a much bigger difference, keeping that force low to penetrate and not deforming, not bending or breaking going through. And I think Dr. Ashby would agree with that. But yeah, I think 450 to 550 grains is a great weight range. I like to have strong arrow connection. I like our reinforced hit system to kind of build that strength into the arrow with the impact collar on the outside. I think if you do hit heavy bone, not only does your broadhead need to be strong, but your connection to the arrow needs to be strong so it doesn't just bend right over. I had those failures a lot when I was testing heavy bone with broadheads. And then, as far as what arrow, the ones we do custom builds on are Easton Axis. I think a 5mm arrow is a good choice. I wouldn't talk people out of micros if they want to go that way, but 5mm gives a good combination of, you get some of the benefits of lower drag. But yet you still use standard thread heads and have that full strength of a standard shank head. So I like that setup there. And one other comment with Ashby, they push that 3-to-1 ratio and say that's the mechanical advantage. Like if it's three times longer than it is wide, like a 3-inch long, 1-inch wide, it'll take 1/3 the force of one that's 1-to-1. That's not actually true. We're not wedging an animal apart. That they're applying a mechanical device of like a wedge or a ramp. They're applying that to how a broadhead cuts through an animal, and they're not applying it right. And I've told Dr. at Ashby about that, and he's like, "Yeah, well, I'm just trying to simplify it for the average person, but I understand trying to simplify it, but it's not actually accurate to say it that way." I've tested longer heads versus shorter heads, and if they're very sharp with good edge retention, it's hard to measure a difference at all. In our longest head versus our shorter, wider head, there's a different angle there on the main blade, and I can't measure a force difference because we're cutting. We're not you're not wedging an animal apart, 1.25 inches or whatever. You're actually slicing it the other way. You're only wedging it apart that thickness of the blade at 62 thousandths. So it's a cutting mechanism. So I feel like they have the mechanism wrong that they're trying to apply the physics to or the engineering to. But yeah, that's another one where the Ashby Foundation, I think, has a bit wrong. And then their weight recommendations for animals is kind of, I don't know if they've changed that, but it used to be like, 600 plus for a deer and things like, and maybe it was an elk that's like 700 or 800 for elk. It's unreasonably high, and where mass doesn't make that big of a difference. And actually the force, because it's, momentum at impact, mass times velocity will equal force times time. So getting a force low to cut, it's going to make it.
I'll explain what all that means later, Rob.
Yeah. Anyway, I hope I answered your question there. I kind of
I appreciate and honestly, I appreciate your honesty on the topic. And it's it was just something I had written down on the notes. Like I said, it's one of those rabbit holes. The minute you start talking about an arrow build and broadheads, all these other things can open up. I'm right there where you recommended. I'm at a 300 spine, 500 total arrow weight with 150 grain head, and I think it was 18 to 20% FO6. So I mean, for my whitetail game with those close encounters, if anything, I'm a little bit heavy, but I'd rather those nice, heavy hitting, clean pass throughs. My last question. If you have it available already, and I don't know, I apologize. Is there a 150 broadhead available from IronWill, or is that something you guys are considering?
There is already. In fact, we offer too many options, I think, currently, because we offer 100, 125, 150, 175, 200, 225, 250.
Oh, you even go
across the board in all of our models, and then we do a number of them with or without bleeder blades too. So yeah, we have a lot of options there for guys that want the heavier broadheads.
Awesome. No, that's great to know. Thank you.
You bet.
All right, so I do want to touch on something else now that we've gotten through the questions, and that's knives.
Yeah.
Now, I guess the short version. What inspired you to start making knives?
It's really because I like backcountry bow hunting. You know, I'm backpacking in several miles in the wilderness area, up, you know, climbing 4,000 feet or something to get to my first camp, and it's in a high elevation, you know, camping 11,000 plus feet, and it's pretty brutal. And when I fell in love with these wilderness areas, and then I realized, man, I got to get in way better shape to hunt these things. And then my gear list was getting lighter. And now it's a few years back, I actually started getting a little heavier. But with knives, I don't really like the replaceable blade knives. I don't like, you know, I had used them a bit, but I just didn't like, you know, for quartering up an elk. I just was popping out blades, or, you know, breaking blades, or, you know, losing it in the animal. They weren't for me. And I've had too many buddies cut themselves on them too. So I always like the fixed blade knives for butchering an animal. And, you know, I don't mind sharpening a knife at the end of season or whatever too. I know a lot of guys don't want to sharpen, but so I was carrying a couple of knives, and they were weighing quite a bit to be, you know, decent steel. So I was kind of unhappy there wasn't a premium steel, you know, a high hardness steel that would hold an edge. There was also ultra light. So I started designing, testing them over a few years. And our first one was the K1. It was just a skeleton knife with paracord on it. It weighed only 1 ounce. So I went and I could do a whole elk with it. I could actually do our original K1 that has a sharpened top edge too, to cut the hides. I could actually do an elk and a deer without touching it up. So I thought for 1 ounce, where I was carrying 2 knives that were together weighing, you know, 3/4 of a pound. And so I know if you're not carrying stuff in your pack all day long, maybe the weight doesn't matter. And I understand that, but that's really what inspired me, is I wanted something I knew there could be something a lot lighter, and then, you know, be able to skin, quarter, debone an elk without carrying a bunch of extra weight around.
So I will say, you know, anybody that's ever seen, you know, basically any picture on my social media, you'll see I have a K2 and I have it attached to my vinyl harness all the time. I love it. Rob has a K1 and he's got it attached to his pack strap. We love the knives. I mean, well, we love the broadheads too, but we love the knives. And I want to touch on the K3 real quick.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to get my hands on one of these things.
I love that knife, by the way.
What really made you make that jump from the K1, which is a great knife, to the K2, which I adore, to now the K3?
Yeah, the K3, it's funny, I actually designed that before the K2, and prototyped it. I just wasn't satisfied with the initial version of it. And I went on with the K3 skinning knife, or the skinning knife was called the K3. Then I had to change it and call it the K2 because we came out with it first. But anyway, the boning knife was something that I initially made a 4-inch version of it, completely straight edge. Tested it for a while, gave it out to outfitters. Some guys loved it. Some guys wanted it to be a little bit longer. But really, for me, when I'm taking the quarters of an elk and, you know, boning it, you know, separating into the muscle groups, and then when I get home and do kind of the final cut up, I like a bit longer knife than our K1, you know, or K2. And really, it's not bad. It's kind of nice to have one in the field too, if you're gonna, you know, take the elk and when I'm trying to minimize weight when I'm packing out elk, because I've packed out a lot of times I'm solo elk hunting and then packing out an elk, you know, 3, 4, 5 miles myself. Luckily, I don't have a real job and I can just take however many days it takes to do it, because usually it's 2. But anyway, it's a nice knife for that, and just cutting back straps out, whatever that if you haven't used basically It's similar to like a 5-inch fillet knife, a bit stiffer. I've made the edge thinner on this one, so the grind, it's got a saber grind on it. The thickness behind the edge is like 16,000ths of an inch, and then the bevel angle is 15 per side. So it is crazy sharp. I mean, I feel like all our stuff is sharp, but this is kind of next level sharp. You'll see when you play around with it. Yeah, I was just cutting tomatoes with it upstairs, making a BLT. I was filleting walleyes with it last weekend. I haven't touched this thing up yet, and I butchered my bear with it too. So it's nice for yeah, and some guys actually use like a 5-inch fillet knife for everything, like to butcher a deer, and so those guys will really like this as well. But anyway, it's a bit different than your standard hunting knife. It's longer, skinnier, looks more like a fillet knife, but it's pretty sweet for cutting up meat for sure.
Well, I can't wait to get my hands on it, and it's going to be in my pack with me going to Alaska, so I'm looking forward to it.
Cool. Yeah, I think I've been carrying the K1 and the K2. Now I'm not sure if I'm going to carry all three, or which ones are going to make it in the pack. I can tell you it's sold really well, though. We sold more We've only had the K3 out for 3-4 weeks, and we've already sold more of those for the year than we did our K2.
Oh shit.
So yeah, it's popular. I don't think there's a lot of ultralight fillet knives out there either, from what I've found. So it only weighs an ounce with paracord. It weighs an ounce and like 1.6 or 1.7 ounces with the full handle. So that's super light for those backpack high country fishermen too, I guess.
Chris, why don't you ask your favorite question then? I mean, that's a perfect segue.
All right, so I guess we can ask this question. So what's your favorite camo pattern, and why is it Sitka Subalpine?
I like that one.
Man, I don't care too much about camo patterns, to be honest. I have a lot of Sitka gear because Jonathan Hart,
it works and it's great.
It's good stuff, no doubt. Jonathan Hart shot a ram with my broadheads and called me up and wanted to hear about our broadheads, and he wanted to buy some more. I'm like, hey, let's make a trade. So he set me up with a lot of Sitka gear from that, and I've had a few other guys prior to that give me Sitka gear for. So I don't buy any gear hardly ever anymore. I just trade with industry guys for stuff. So I have lots of Sitka gear. Love it. I've got a fair amount of Kuiu gear from trades too. Good stuff.
Listen, it was all founded by Jason Hairston, so he made some good stuff. I'll allow it.
Right. I can talk about just about all. I had some Numa gear given to me for a while. They were doing more direct to consumer, and a buddy of mine worked for them, and he sent me some Numa gear. That's pretty good stuff. It's not ultralight for mountain stuff, but it was pretty good whitetail stuff. And I like First Light. I like First Light base layers a lot. So I wear often my first layer is like a First Light long sleeve tee or hoodie or something. So you might see a picture of me with an animal and I got 4 different camos on.
Yeah.
Quite often, because I just pick the best piece of gear and don't really care who made it or what the because I've tried it all a lot. But I probably do have more Sitka gear than anything that I use. It's good stuff for sure.
So there you go. So now, where can everybody find your content for IronWill, and where can anybody make purchases of your equipment?
Yeah, on our website, IronWill Outfitters.com. You can buy our product there. You can go to our testing and bow hunter blog if you want to read more about the university study and the findings there. We have a YouTube channel, IronWill Outfitters, where we do a lot of product videos, some hunting related videos, how-to videos, things like that. Instagram, IronWill Outfitters, at IronWill Outfitters is our Instagram and Facebook. We copy everything from Instagram to Facebook, so you can use either of those channels to check things out. I think we might have a TikTok, but I've never been on there to see it, so I'm not sure.
Instagram's the bread, the meat and potatoes between that and YouTube, without a doubt. We appreciate you coming on and honestly really letting us dive in and then sharing all the info that you did tonight. It's we appreciate it. I know the listeners appreciate it. You're very honest with all your answers, and you gave us everything we thought this episode was going to be, to be honest. So thank you sincerely for joining.
Yeah, great. I love bow hunting. I love good mechanical engineering, developing bow hunting products and testing them, and just trying to, at this point, just trying to help people become better bow hunters. So yeah, it's what I enjoy doing.
All right. Well, moving forward, anything we could do as a team, from Pursuit Live, the whole team, anything we could do to help IronWill. Sincerely, we're here to help. Any new products you end up coming down the line, you need help promoting them, just let us know.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Like I said, we're not going to get you that Joe Rogan level, but we'll get damn close.
Well, really, I've been on about every podcast people ask me to do. I think I've recorded 7 in the last 2 weeks here, actually.
Oh,
wow. So it wasn't Joe Rogan's podcast, though. But you probably know the names of the rest of them. But to be honest, I have no idea who's the best or worst in bow hunting or outdoors. If
it's Pursuit Live. Let's
I figured you guys are way up there. I just wasn't sure.
We honestly do take a humble approach. We keep it lighthearted. We try and have fun with it. But sincerely, thank you again. And anything we could do, that is a genuine offer. So just that's all I got, man. My notes are scratched off. Awesome show. Hour and a half into it. Great show. So that's all we can ask for. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet. Well, have a good weekend, guys.
Thank you so much, Bill, for taking the time out. And again, we're big fans of the products. Keep doing what you guys are doing, because you're knocking it out of the park. So,
well, thank you.
We appreciate everything you're doing for the outdoor industry, and most importantly, we appreciate you taking the time out and to chat with us tonight.
Well, yeah, thank you, guys.
So with that, everybody, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Pursuit Live. Catch us every Friday night live right here on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube at our new time slot, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. With that, everybody, have a good night. If we don't see you, have a 4th of July. Happy 4th of July, excuse me. And we'll see you all out there.